What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. War, in all of its forms, has always left a mark on those who fight it. But when a war lacks clear objectives and moral justification, it leaves even deeper psychological and social scar which is almost impossible to get rid of. As soldiers return home, they bring with them not only physical injuries, but also emotional and mental trauma, often leaving their families and loved ones struggling to adapt to the changed individuals they once knew. The most recent, unreasonable conflict for Russians is obviously the war in Ukraine. Today, let's explore the complex challenges faced by soldiers, the psychological toll on both veterans and their families, examine historical comparisons to past conflicts, and discuss the societal and institutional shortcomings in addressing these issues. Wars have always had one of the biggest impacts on the mental health of soldiers. However, the mental strain is often exacerbated when the war in question lacks clear moral justification or strategic purpose. In the case of the ongoing war in Ukraine, many soldiers find themselves with feelings of confusion and absence of purpose. Sure, there are orders given by the officers and generals, which usually mean capturing the hill you see in front of you, or capturing an abandoned barn in order to turn it into a military base, or even taking the settlement in front of you under control. The settlement, which has a dozen houses, 50 residents, all of who already left long time ago. These are daily or weekly goals, but the soldiers do not see the bigger picture why they're fighting, why they're doing these things. There is no great victory in sight. Such war is just trying to stay alive every day, not knowing if this is your last one. They will not return home as heroes, because most of them are contract soldiers or were forced into the fight. They did not choose to be there because of promises of eternal glory. Well, at least 99% of them. Unlike wars fought in defense of the nation or its people, this war lacks the moral clarity that allows Russian soldiers to cope with their actions during and after combat. Ukrainians, on the other hand, they do have a purpose, a very big one. They protect their home, their land, their friends and relatives. They can't simply retreat. There is no land to surrender. Each meter of soil is their own country. If Russians are just pushed out of the city, they just call it a tactically retreat to more advantageous positions. But if Ukrainians retreat, they give up their homeland. Sometimes quite literally. That's why every single Ukrainian soldier sees a reason why he or she is fighting. They want to free their country from the occupiers. They want to provide safe future for their kids and themselves. They don't want to wake up to air raid sirens and be freezing during winter because the enemy destroyed your energy facilities. I think you guys can agree that one side has many more reasons to fight than the other. In historical comparisons, we can see huge differences between veterans of just wars and those who returned from unjust conflicts. Take, for example, the Second World War veterans, who were hailed as heroes upon their return home, and still are. Most of the times during sports events, for example, such as hockey or football games, they are being acknowledged by the organizers, and everyone in the crowd stands, cheers and claps for them. They knew they had fought to protect their country from obvious threats. In contrast, veterans of the Vietnam War, for example, unfortunately, experienced widespread societal alienation and internal moral conflict as the war's objectives were ambiguous and its justification was widely questioned. Russian veterans of the current conflict face a similar fate, or potentially even worse than that. Because in America, there are veteran support programs, no matter which war you fought. In modern Russia, when a person returns home, he is left all to himself. And usually, it is the family that has to take care of this person and suffer the consequences. We'll talk about the impact on families in more details, guys, a little bit later. For many of these soldiers, returning home means confronting the reality that their sacrifices may not be honored. In fact, they may be viewed with suspicion or even neglect by their communities. After all, the picture that every Russian supports the invasion is just that, a picture. In no way this is the real thing in Russia. This is a clever work of propaganda. Most people are indifferent to this conflict in Ukraine, and if they are forced to choose without a fear of being prosecuted, most of them will be against the invasion and violence. Well, actually, if I think about it, there is a very minor help to the returning veterans from the government. I did hear about some kind of memos being distributed to the families of returning veterans, providing instructions on how to interact with their loved ones. These memos describe the returning soldiers in the following terms: individuals prone to violent outbursts, paranoia, and emotional instability. And, well, that's pretty much it. Just a memo. A warning that the person who is about to come home might not be the same person he or she used to be. So, prepare to deal with that. We warned you, we did our job, it is now your responsibility to take care of your family. The psychological toll of war is not limited to the soldiers who fight it. The families too suffer the consequences of the emotional destruction. The loved ones of returning soldiers often find themselves living with individuals who have been fundamentally changed by their experiences. These changes can be seen in a variety of ways, ranging from emotional withdrawal to violent outbursts, from substance abuse to paranoia, and much worse. Such veterans treat people around them like they are not appreciative of their easy lives. Like not a single problem is worth worrying about unless it is a problem of getting shot. Soldiers of unjust war consider the society where they live as a bunch of spoiled people who don't know life. All the entertainment should be deserved. And those people who, eat in the restaurants, go to cinemas and celebrate holidays are just a bunch of losers who have nothing better to do with their lives. Well, that's the real attitude. With such attitude, once again, it is no wonder veterans always find themselves that nobody understands them. And that's why they can't fit into the society anymore. And the only people who do understand them are the very same veterans as them. And that's exactly what usually happens. They get together, get alcohol, they drink, and remember their days of war and the fallen friends, thinking that the whole world is indebted to them for their sacrifice. And guys, by the way, I'm mostly talking about the Russian war veterans, because in this country there is absolutely no support to such people, so the situation in your country might be different. Feel free to share down below in the comments if you agree that the situation is exactly the same in your country, or is it different. And so yeah, but the situation is even worse for the families. Wives and children in particular, they find themselves in an impossible situation. They are expected to offer support and understanding to their returning husbands and fathers, even as they struggle to recognize the person who came back. Because they know that if they don't help them, nobody else will. They lived a big part of their lives together, and they know that deep inside there is still the same person they fell in love with. And there is always this hope that one day this person will come back. The body might have returned from war, but the mind is still there. The psychological strain on these families is immense. In many cases, spouses found themselves walking on eggshells, literally, afraid to upset their partners who may react unpredictably to even the most insignificant things. In some cases, families are instructed to take on the role of the therapist, a role they are neither trained for nor emotionally prepared to handle. And the only help from the government are those memos we talked about previously. These instructions emphasize caution, advising wives to approach their husbands slowly and speak in calm, quiet tones to avoid startling them. But even this might not be enough. There are many stories when men were waking up in the middle of the night, thinking they are still sitting in a trench under enemy fire. They start to scream and force their family members to run and hide to avoid being killed. Nobody prepares families for such challenges. And at first, when wives and kids have no idea what is happening, it triggers the father even more, because nobody is reacting to him, giving orders, when he genuinely thinks he's saving them. Moreover, families often find themselves alienated by society. As the war continues, public sentiment towards it becomes increasingly negative, and this disapproval extends to the soldiers and their families. These families, already struggling with the emotional toll of war, now face the additional challenge of societal rejection. In extreme cases, the mental health issues of the returning soldiers begin to affect the entire family, creating a cycle of trauma that is difficult to break. And in case family does fall apart, which happens sometimes, the guy's life is pretty much over. He will end up on the street forgotten by everyone, and friends and families of the wife will always judge her because of abandoning her husband during the most difficult times, even though none of them will ever know the full story. Addressing the psychological needs of veterans and their families requires a comprehensive and long-term approach. Unfortunately, as of right now, the resources available to these individuals are almost non-existent. While there have been some localized efforts to provide support, these initiatives are often underfunded and lack the expertise necessary to address the deep psychological wounds inflicted by war. In some regions, non-governmental organizations have stepped in to offer assistance, but their efforts are inconsistent, and many lack the professional qualifications which are needed to deal with PTSD and other war-related mental health issues. The situation is further complicated by the fact that mental health services are still stigmatized in many parts of Russia. Seeking help for psychological issues is often seen as a sign of weakness, both by veterans themselves and by society in general. The mindset of such people is the following. Just stop being sad. You have both legs, both hands, you're still alive. What to be sad about? You're a man, get your things together and stop being a wimp. That is literally the attitude. To truly support the rehabilitation of veterans and their families, a massive coordinated effort is required. This effort must include not only the provision of professional mental health services, but also a shift in societal attitudes towards mental health. The stereotypes surrounding psychological treatment must be dismantled, and veterans must be encouraged to seek the help they need without the fear of judgment. At the same time, the government must take a leading role in funding and organizing these efforts. This will require a significant financial investment, but it is a necessary one if Russia hopes to address the long-term consequences of this war. The recovery process will not be quick or easy, but it is essential for the health and well-being of the country's veterans, their families, and society as a whole. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. If you wish to support my work, there are links down below, PayPal donations, Patreon subscriptions. You can also buy the Russian Dude merch. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow. We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell. Their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.